So hello, I'm Sydney Marshall. I'm the assistant curator here at University Museums. Well, not here. We are in Kingland Hub in the Gerdin Busines Building. And so, I'm glad to have you all here. And it's really great to be hosted in the newly renovated Gerdin Busines Building. I'd like to begin by thanking our sponsors. This talk and the exhibition in the Christian Peterson Art Museum is sponsored by the Debbie and Jerry Ivy College of Business. Generous support was provided by Avis Lovell Andre, Vicki and Norman Hill, and Robert and Nancy Lindemeyer, and Cynthia and John Passion. So, Rose Frantzen is an artist living and working in Maquoketa, Iowa. She is nationally and internationally acclaimed for her skill in oil painting and has been featured in exhibitions at the Smithsonian's National Portrait Gallery, the Butler Institute of American Art, and the Denver Historical Museum, among others. Rose is a frequent demonstrator and instructor of painting, and her work is featured in the collections of the Iowa State University Museums, the Figge Art Museum, the USDA, the World Food Prize, and many others. Rose Frantzen has been a part of the Art on Campus collection since 2015, and in the past 7 years, she has contributed to a wide variety of the collections within the museum. She has painted formal portraits of department chairs and deans, including the Ivy College's Dean Spalding, and has also been commissioned for a large-scale landscape in the ATRB building, a portrait honoring the two ISU alumni, Henry A. Wallace and George Washington Carver, and has painted over 40 portraits for the Faces of Iowa State series. This semester, Rose Frantzen's influence on the Art on Campus collection is being highlighted in the Christian Peterson Art Museum with Perceptions of Identity. This exhibition has allowed for visitors to explore how Rose approaches each individual object and project with intentionality and research, pulling out the unique aspects of the subject and making it her own. Her studio work, including the In the Face of Illusion series, is the focus of the exhibition. By melding portraiture with optical illusion, Rose leads the viewer through a personal exploration of how we experience the world and encounter groups of people. This series is a thinking tool to reflect on how unconscious bias can affect every person and how art can provide an entry point to think deeply about how society functions. So I invite you to come visit the gallery in Morrill Hall Monday through Friday from 10 to 4. Okay, so and now to speak about the Ivy College of Business's relationship with Rose Frantzen and their newest commission for the Art on Campus collection, I'd like to introduce Dean David Spalding from the Debbie and Jerry Ivy College of Business.
Well, thank you, Sydney. And I was told I could take my face covering off given distancing, and I'm going to be the only one using this mic. So what a fun occasion. Thank you all so much for coming to join us. Having a chance to have Rose Frantzen here speaking in the Ivy College of Business is just a wonderful treat for all of us. Love the idea of bringing the arts and business together as they've been really together for centuries. If you think about many of the early commissions coming from successful businessmen from the world going back to the Medicis and before. So we continue that tradition with this latest commission with Rose. So as Sydney mentioned, Rose painted my portrait. The most fun thing I've done since moving to Iowa was sitting for Rose Frantzen. She is a hoot. We had a great time together. The only thing I was sorry about was it only lasted like 7 hours. And I was like, surely I need to sit more, right? Can't I come over to Maquoketa and sit for another extra day? And then Chuck's really wonderful, really enjoyed getting to know Chuck. And we just had great conversations all the way through. So really wonderful to have Rose here speaking, and really to have Rose do this wonderful mural that we're going to have downstairs, one floor below us. So this mural that she's doing for us will be the largest painting that she's painted for the Art on Campus collection. It's going to be the main entrance coming in from the Wallace Road side, coming from the east side into the building. We call that wonderful corridor the Anderson Family Gallery. So please don't call it a hallway. It truly, as you look at that space and the very high ceilings, the very wide corridor, it is truly a gallery space. And when we really looked at a variety of alternatives in terms of where to best site the art we were going to put here, And the thing I loved about putting it where it's going to be is that hundreds of students a day are going to walk past that mural. And hundreds of students a day are going to be struck by the work that Rose has done, the way she's tried to capture the vision that we have for the Ivy College of Business, a college truly on the move, truly engaged in entrepreneurship, really looking to change the lives of our students during the time that they're here. The wonderful faculty that we have are engaged every day in that work with our students, and all of that is going to come out of this wonderful mural that's going to be done. We really appreciate Lynn and Diane Anderson for their sponsorship of this space for us, and it's really going to be, again, a living gallery for us. So in preparation for Rose to do this work, we had have a public art committee here in the Ivy College of Business, and they wrote a guiding public art statement. The statement read, "The Ivy College of Business at Iowa State University is looking for an object of public art that represents the sophistication and professionalism of business education that links theory with practice." Now that statement wasn't enough. Rose met with the committee as an artist normally would, and oh my gosh, did she probe deeply with the committee to really understand what we were thinking, what really the vision was and what was behind the vision, so that she could come up with the right approach to this project. And just the initial sketches that we saw that she did really showed that she was very much on the right path with what our vision was for this wonderful piece of art. So I'm really excited to get a look at it here. I've seen sort of partials along the way, and I'm really excited about her talk today and getting a chance to look at this. And so I ask you now, it's really my honor, but I ask you all to welcome Rose Frantzen to Gerdin.
Thank you, David. First, I'd like to say it's really wonderful to be back at ISU. I have spent a year in the studio, partly because of the project that we're doing, and we all also know why, the other reason why I've been a year in the studio, is this is my first engagement with people other than Chuck and my parents. And it's been pretty intense, just moving from like all the thoughts in my head to try to figure out how to get my thoughts out into the world, like as far as words. So we had a few phone calls with some of my girlfriends for me to practice using my words. So we'll see. So we'll see how I do today. So we're going to start with showing a little bit of like the commission work that I've done for Iowa State, and you're going to see the Gerdin murals. See? Bear with me, folks. It's going to be a long day. But the Gerdin murals for the first time. And let's just say they're not quite finished yet. I've been working on them probably about 12 hours a day since probably May, I think, is when I was finally able to get all my stuff, my canvases and all the things stretched up and everything. So you ready, Chuck? So this is where the one I'm working on now is at. And you'll see, some of you have posed for me. I see Ed McCracken back there, right? And who else has posed for Faces of Iowa State? Some other, yeah, there you go. Good. And this is a very different approach because I'm painting, I draw the whole thing up, and this is all inked in, and then I'm going to put the paint on top of it. So this is just the piece where it is when I left home today, okay? But now you'll go to the panel. This is panel number 2. Chuck, want to go ahead? This is the first panel. And now it's going to, imagine it on a wall without all the extra stuff in my studio behind it, so all of a sudden it becomes less busy, just so you know. And I'm hoping this one is something, I'm still trying to figure out the title, but it's like the student's experience. This is the first panel. And I hope you see that she's moving toward, ready for, then the second panel, which you can't see. And then we have the third panel, which I consider more the entrepreneurial panel. Do you want to put that up, Chuck? Oh, and this is just like a close-up. We can't photograph it in my studio, the whole thing in my studio. Now go to the side. But there's a sort of a shot of those two parts get put together into one long painting. And what I've done really is, you can't see it from the one that's not painted yet, but the whole thing is still centering on people, right? And one of the themes that we kind of arrived at the end of the the second conversation after the theory into practice. I mean, imagine getting a call from somebody and says, we want you to paint business, right? And you know, I mean, I remember one of the questions to the committee was, what does business look like, right? I mean, think about it. You know, when you think of business, you might think of a piece of paper that has information on it, and it's a few buildings that have where the paper is made and processed and thoughts are put on. But what it really struck me is that business is really about the exchange between people, and that we have and the product that is being made in the school is people who can take on any form of business. And so what I sort of felt like in the entrepreneurial section, these are like icons, which are like the contemporary way of sort of representation. It's a new symbolism that we all now are very familiar with because of the phone, because of digitization. And so I've tried to think of about as many businesses as possible to represent it, and they're all in these icons, kind of coming out of this, coming out of these worlds. And if you see, I have Main Street, I have Wall Street, and then go back to the other one, Chuck. I have the farms, and then I have industry. And then on the two sides of the piece, you'll see the earth is on one side, and on the other side I have a representation of like the dollar, like a section of the dollar bill. But I use the E pluribus unum section of it because always out of many one, you know, always out of many one. And so they are on both sides of it, because the other theme that the committee kind of touched in on was people, profit, planet. Do you remember this, David? That when we went back into it, they said that they thought that they wanted that represented a little bit more. And if you start to look a little bit more closely, when you finally see the original painting, which I think you'll enjoy even more than the slide, you will see that people, profit, planet is in this arrangement all over the place. It's like this little hint of theme all over the pieces. But I have these three people sort of in between the profit and the planet, in a way, the representations of profit and planet. Hoping to get there. What do you think, David? I'm looking at him. It's okay. So, I mean, I feel like I utilize the human being because, one, I think that we can never quit thinking about the human being as the entrance into the universe. You know, I mean, I'm interested in an idea, and maybe we'll just start to move to the next stuff, Chuck. And we thought we would look at but maybe you don't need to go to the landscapes, but we thought we would show different commissions that I was doing for Iowa State. The slideshow is not actually going to be quite just what I was going to talk about. I tend to not write my speeches out, because when I have written my speeches out, I can't really follow them. So having an organized slideshow was another bit of pressure for me. So let me just say, let's hold on to the universe thought, and let's hope I get back to it, okay? So we'll talk about this interruption of the landscape paintings. So these are the studies I did. So when I did the ATRB building painting, is that the right way of saying it, Wendy? Yeah. The ATRB, so I went out and painted 15 bean fields for over 2 years, at least 15. And these look like, some of them are this size, but if you go to the show at the Christian Peterson, you can see 4 samples of them. But some of them are like 24 by 48 out on location. And then this is an amalgamation piece. So I was trying to do a little bit like I did in the Gerdin murals, where I put different parts of landscapes and bean fields together and create my own bean field. And some of them are direct painting, looking at the scene, trying to find out which way, you're gonna keep going? Trying to find out which way I wanted to represent the idea of bean fields. They wanted to focus on bean fields, but I think in Iowa, you can never, like for me personally, whenever I go out into the fields, I never want to get too far away from what Grant Wood gave us, which is this relationship to our rolling hills. And so I wound up like, so it has this a bit, even though it's a bean fields from out by Preston, Iowa, I don't know, is where I wound up finding this corner of this section of these bean fields. But I somewhat stylized the final version. So you would have this sort of a bit of an art historical relationship with Grant Wood as well. So there's the Beanfield painting. And then, of course, we have the Carver Wallace, right, Chuck? And this was the first painting that I did for the Iowa State. And you can see this over at the show, too, the live version. And this is sort of, let me say, like, for me personally, I am incredibly grateful for the opportunity as an artist to do the commissions that I've been getting from Iowa State. To start off with a commission where I'm asked to paint a mentoring relationship between Henry A. Wallace and George Washington Carver. Like, can you somehow paint the idea of mentorship? Now, that was a little bit easier to tackle than business, let me just say. Just on the phone call, do you know what I'm saying? Like, but business became really fascinating to me because I've done a lot of books on business, and I'm also really interested in some things. I bet I'm reading a book right now that business people actually pay attention to, Thinking Fast and Slow by Danny Kahneman. Have you guys looked at that book and what he's done? You know, he's like, yeah, so he got a Nobel Prize for what, psychological economics or something, I can't really describe it. So I think, and I know now because I tried to get it from the library, an audio, and it's all checked out for like 55 people are ahead of me from on the list at the library. And I heard recently that business people are using that book. And you'll see that that book is actually sort of fundamental to my illusion show as well, right? I was learning from him when I was doing the illusion show as well. But so what I mean to say is, I'm incredibly grateful for Iowa State for giving me these seeds and saying, hey, let's see what you can do with it. You know, well, why not? You guys plant, right? We plant here, huh? We plant seeds. And to have that experience for me as a painter has just been really tremendous because maybe I'll just tell a tiny bit of a story. When I was 22, 21, I was painting with a mentor. My mentor was Richard Schmidt. He was a fabulous painter. And I remember we were out painting in Door County, Wisconsin. I had never been there before. And we're painting there's grasses in the fields. And then there's this 1970s house that he's turning into some romantic version of something. And I'm like, wow, that's what paint can do, right? First off. Because to imagine that you could change something that I just would never have painted in a million years. But while Richard is painting, he's naming the grasses, okay? And he's in his 50s. He's my age now. And I'm looking at him, and I'm 21, 22, and I'm going, and this is before we had the internet, when you had a field of grass that you could actually go on and research. You know, this is when you had to find a, and he's like naming the grasses, and I'm like, Richard, I will never, ever be able to learn all the grasses. It's just not going to happen. How do you ever, I mean, it's enough to learn how to paint them, and rather than just also name them. But now I'm 55 years old, and these projects are showing me that I love to learn. Like in the Carver Wallace or in the business pieces, I love to learn what people do or what people think in worlds that I don't get to explore. And maybe that's a good tie to even the faces of Iowa State. What's been fascinating for me to do is to sit in front of experts and people who are learning to be experts and people who have a desire one day to be an expert. You know, I'm learning, people who've excelled in some way or another, giving to other people on the planet, to sit across from them and have them teach me. It's been insanely fascinating to learn about all these different things, all the different, like didn't I do a nuclear engineer? I mean, painting engineers, first off, is like a whole other thing. I mean, that's another joke, another story. When I grew up, my dad, people come up, because there's 3 or 4 of us that are sort of artistically inclined in my family. And the family joke was my dad, people come to the gallery and they'd say, Wayne, how did you get all these artists in your family? He said, I told them to be engineers, right? So now I'm sitting across from engineers when I was painting Portrait of Maquoketa, actually learning what engineers were like. I mean, not Portrait of Maquoketa, Faces of Iowa State, learning what engineers were really like and how they were and how they were in the world. It was absolutely fascinating. So I learned that if you live long enough on the planet, you eventually want to learn the grasses and all the different names, right? But you just don't know what you just don't know. You just don't know what's possible out there. you know, especially when you're just in the beginning. So anyway, so the Carver Wallace painting was really my first initiation into that idea that you could, I mean, I had been painting ideas and putting ideas into my paintings, but the idea of taking this, to try to figure out how to put science into a painting and sort of give that, and sort of, or try to put mentorship into a painting, or try to put business into a painting. It's just, I think I will die happier for having had this experience. So ready, Chuck? So now you know that I paint the portraits, and you know that I'm loving all the things that people do, but of course the thing that I love most about what I get to do is I get to learn people. And when I was in ninth grade, and in Maquoketa junior high school, this is when this ninth grade wasn't at the high schools yet. I was, like, I had wanted to be an artist since I was 7, but it wasn't something that anybody sort of encouraged. I think we live in a different world now where you find that you can grow up and be an artist, and there's, like, your parents are in line, lots of people are in line, you're getting classes and stuff. But when you grew up in Maquoketa in the time that I grew up in the 70s, saying that you wanted to be an artist, nobody really knew how that was going to happen for you, right? And there wasn't a lot of people putting me in front of art. But in ninth grade, Mrs. Riesdell had us do a grid on top of a photograph. And my dad was a photographer, and he had taken a photograph of my brother and I when I was 5, and he was 7 or 6 or 7. And the grid was you put this grid on a photograph, you put these squares, and then you put the grid on your painting, on your canvas, or on your watercolor or your drawing. This was a pencil drawing. And then you copy what's in the grid, and you put it on to the paper. So you look at the grid, and you say everything that happens in that square gets put into a bigger square on your thing, and you draw it in. Anybody worked like that before? So, you know, that's how they transfer paintings, these cartoons. It's kind of a cartoon. This is how they transfer paintings like the Sistine Chapel up on the wall. I mean, they gridded it and they put that up there. And when I did that, I painted people for the first time. I didn't know that you could do people, right, up until then. And I drew my brother and I told my parents, and I told everybody that that's what I want to do. I want to paint people for the rest of my life. When I learned that that was possible, that was it. It was as if, like, the universe had all, like, channeled. Oh, it got back to the universe. One in between, sitting in between, channeled everything in my life and organized it to that is, like, something I understood, you know, that I wanted to paint people. So now I'm 35 years into it, you know, painting people, and I've had the opportunity of painting Portrait Maquoketa, and everybody here knows what that project is. And then I'm doing the faces of Iowa State. And it's interesting because there's 2 different flavors. You know, the Portrait Maquoketa had a little bit different flavor from the Iowa State people, which is interesting for me too. And that isn't a judgment in a sense. It is interesting to be with people who, what I really get from people in the university is, I feel like I've moved into a great deal of passion. You know, I'll say one thing I've learned from painting people at Iowa State University that I didn't know of painting Portrait Maquoketa. Painting Portrait Maquoketa, I kind of had this idea that every person needed to be seen with dignity. And everybody needed to be treated, like we all have a sense of nobility about us. Like, I think nobility is a nice word in the sense that to be human is, in a way, an ennobling endeavor. You know, and when I painted Portrait Maquoketa, I felt that there was, like, what they taught me was that people ached to be seen. But painting people at Iowa State, what I realized, and what I realized yesterday even, painting the 2 people I painted yesterday, is that not only are people of great value, and that their dignity is of great value, but at Iowa State, what I've learned is that people are determined to help make the world better. I mean, I have met people who are really trying. And I know we have gone through, like in the last 4 years when I first started this next show, which is the Illusion Show, we've gone through like some hills and valleys, very obvious hills and valleys. But when you know, so like even like certain problems that the world is facing, I am completely convinced that there are people who are out there really trying to solve them. People are really out here. And I really met that in Iowa State. Like, people are solving problems I didn't even know existed. And people are struggling with things that and it's just, now, I think maybe you all know this, but, you know, I guess for me as a painter, as an artist, maybe I have to learn everything in bits and pieces, you know? And sitting across from people and having this, it felt like an experience of it. An experience of people's willingness and desire and that they're driven to actually assist in this life, assist in our species, assist in in our species survival on this beautiful planet. So that was some of the little bit different flavor that Iowa State, Painting the Faces of Iowa State gave me from Portrait Maquoketa. So now let's talk about the Illusion Show. So I've been painting these portraits and looking to each person and seeing this. And then, of course, we hear this, do I want to say this? Let me say it. So the first time I've ever seen my work advertised in the way that's been advertised for this show at Faces of Iowa State, it's the first direct advertisement of my dive into the political realm. I've never like said it directly. When this show first showed, I always sort of hedged around it. But I saw that if you read the text on this show, you'll see that I did this painting. I started this series because we were asked to build a wall to keep people out, okay? And I'm thinking, knowing and learning that people inherently need to be treated with dignity and to feel their dignity and their respect from the Portrait Maquoketa people. And I'm also learning that people at like institutions like at the Iowa State University have a deep desire to contribute to well-being and to life on the planet, okay? So I'm thinking if we're going to build a wall to stop people from whatever, right? If we think that the way people do better is by building walls against each other, I thought that maybe I should build a wall of all the people that we think we don't want here from that conversation. So this series of paintings came from the 2016 political debate. And I started out wanting to paint the series from my anger, right? Or from my disagreement, or from my reaction, all right? But I haven't felt that art lives, like my art. Now, some people's art lives in that place, but I've never really felt like when I put my brush down at the end of the night, that if I put a painting, if I'm making work that makes the world feel more divided, I don't know if I'm being utilized in my best way. So when I got this idea that I had to somehow represent the people on this and build a wall, and this is the display of the paintings. It's like my wall of all the people that we think shouldn't be here. What I found in the first thing was I realized that everybody should be on that wall. And it didn't matter what color, what gender, what race, anything that you were, there's always somebody who thinks, if we look for it, that you shouldn't be here or you're doing something. So this is my dive into the dark. Let me just say the dark part of our nature after telling you these nice light things about us. And so because I can't land on the negative, ultimately, when I have a brush in my hand, I had to, for months after I got the idea that I was going to paint this wall, I had to figure out what would be its its avenue of redemption. Like, how could it, if I'm going to go into the dark, I have to give us, or myself at least, let me just say that. I think I always start at home. But I had to give myself some sort of way out of the argument. And I was in the shower, and so I'm starting to paint some of the heads, right? Some of the big heads, and finding my subjects. And I have about 3 or 4 people painted or lined up. And I'm in the shower in my bathroom. And I've been really, so one of the things that the Carver Wallace thing started in me was, I didn't know I was interested in science, but I'm interested in science. So I'm interested in the brain. I'm interested in the human beings, like the way we think, the way the mind is. And so I'm in the shower, washing my hair. And I have my wall in the shower. Chuck and I designed our showers. And we got those tiles from India. You know those tiles where they're like this slate, they're these black slate tiles, and they're multicolored, but they're all kind of grays, and they're variations of grays, but they're all these different designs. Has anybody seen them? I think you've seen them. If I showed you my shower, maybe we should do that in the slideshow. But maybe we'll do that next time, Chuck. Take a picture of the shower. So when we tiled this wall, of course, Chuck and I are arranging the tiles so they all sung in their biggest glory. So there's like an orange one here, and there's a little bit more of a yellow-green one. But they're all gray, right? Which is interesting. Even that idea is interesting, that there's colors inside of the gray. So all these tiles are there. And so all the time that I've been washing my hair in the shower, and when I look at it, I always saw faces in it. Faces in those shower things, so the way there's chunks of the tile missing, there's chunks of tile blackened or browned, or there was always portraits, there was always people in there. And I'm washing my hair, looking at that tile, and I'm like, where are the people, right? Because I could only see landscapes. That day, all the tiles only were making landscapes up. And I'm looking at them and going like, where are the people? And I'm like, I know that you're supposed to see faces and things because there's this thing called pareidolia. Pareidolia, anybody know how to say it properly? Somebody does. So somebody correct me. But anyway, pareidolia, it's like a thing where you see faces and things. Like the toilet paper rolled and coming down to the floor, there's a portrait there. Or a towel hanging on the rack, you see a person in that. Some people, I sometimes have thought those were spirits sort of watching you and your angels guiding you, but no, that's another topic. So anyway, I don't see the people. And I'm like, but I'm only seeing landscape, and I go, where are the people? And I realized that, it's like a optical illusion or something. And when I did that, I'm like, that's it. That's what I'll put with the people on the wall. I'll put, not that this was an optical illusion. Optical illusion was what came to my mind in the moment, right? I was seeing something that I didn't see before and seeing something that I wasn't able to see something that I always see before, right? So I'm like, optical illusions with people. And so then my research became studying optical illusions and then trying to find an optical illusion that fit with each person's narrative. And so this show starts to become about that. And maybe I'll talk about an optical illusion first, Chuck, before I talk about... Well, no, maybe it's good for me to say this. So pull up the first one, Chuck, the one we thought I would talk about. So I start with this. Now, this was a beautiful painting I had of a woman nude floating in a bunch of soft cloths and stuff. And this is the first painting that I finished for the show. And I was taking these paintings and taking paintings that I thought were going in one direction and trying to take them into this idea for the wall, all right? And this woman it's a beautiful painting, and I'm like, I knew I needed to do something with it, right, to make it better. It wasn't working, and it certainly wasn't ready for the optical illusion show at all. So I put it on my easel, and then the reason why I'm telling you the story is because I think this helps demonstrate something. So I put it on the easel, and the task I laid in front of me was that I wouldn't put a single stroke on the painting unless it's a stroke that I wouldn't do. If that makes any sense. So all the time when I'm working, I'm always going toward a canvas, like, what does it need? You know, and what does it need? And it's usually what I need is a bias that I have toward that painting. Like, it needs a little bit of this. It's an intuitive process. It's an intellectual process. It's always a process that I agree with, okay? So to stand in front of the painting and say, I am not going to put a stroke up that I want to do. I'm going to put a stroke up that I wouldn't do, all right? And stand here in this spot and don't make a move toward that painting unless I think there's something I wouldn't do. Now, even that whole thing now in all my research is almost an impossible endeavor, but it felt like an endeavor. Fair enough? In my experience, it felt like something that I hadn't, and so I was doing things to this painting that was a beautiful painting that I probably could have sold that was destroying it, right? And I kept destroying it, and I kept destroying it, and going in and putting this color on top of it, throwing the liquid all over it, and you know, going after it and going back. And Chuck comes over, and he sees it, and he goes, "What are you doing?" And I'm like, "I know, right?" But the reason why I tell this story is because I think sometimes we have, like, what the optical illusion, in order to get to see what the, well, let me say, I'm ahead of myself. I wonder what the posture it is, what posture it is that one needs to be in order to see something outside of the illusion. Fair enough? And maybe it's seeing what I think I like and going against it, or what I think is, or learning what I think it is, and interrupting it, okay? So with the optical illusions, want to go to the next one, John? I can't, you guys sound like I can't breathe. I was like, I'm so, like, yeah, it's hard. This is the first time I've done it. Yeah, there you go. I got a mask on. It's like, that's the reason why. I'm like, what the heck? Okay, do you want to go to the next one, Chuck? So this painting is called Patterns of White Defining Black, Defining White, Defining Black, ... obscuring the individual. And it has a partner painting with the guy, right? The white guy. In this optical illusion, I think it's called the Keynesian triangle. And you don't paint the triangle, you actually paint the circle. And everywhere you see a triangle is actually formed by what's missing. And I sort of think that what we do, in one of the ways we define things, like here we go, we put a guy underneath, every guy's underneath this sort of category of white male privilege. I always like the fact there was 3 words to it, just like the points of a triangle, like white male privilege. And I know for a full fact that this guy doesn't feel privileged. So he's burdened by this idea that we've placed upon him. It's like an invisible triangle that this patterns of white defining black and black defining white have put in front of him. Fair enough? So this entire show, so go back to the woman. So she too is coming through the triangles, right? The triangles that are formed by what's the white is not obscuring. Fair enough? So the entire show becomes a show not only about the optical illusions and the persons behind or being obscured by it, but also the titles that I use to describe it. And that's how I started to walk into the political realm. And so what I'm hoping you'll see, so you want to go to targets? How can we see straight when all we see are targets? Is the title of this piece. And this optical illusion, the title completely describes the optical illusion, which is, you want to close up? Which is, I can't remember the name of the optical illusion, but the bends that are happening in the red lines, you see it, but everybody sees it? Yeah, that actually is an illusion. All the lines are straight. So it's just because of the shapes of those circles around it are what's distorting it. So putting it with the guy that is, you want to go back out? That is obviously unarmed, right? I'm hoping that you see something, right? And geez, is this the right thing for me to do? I don't know. I don't know. But I'll tell you, it was for me, it was something I needed to do. to do this show, you know? Maybe it's back to that, like what I wouldn't do, what I wouldn't say with my work, the stroke I wouldn't do, but doing this show sort of helped me sort of look at all these ideas of identities and groups that we put people in just by the smallest things that are possible about them. Like the last thing we are ultimately is just the color of our skin. I mean, it is just like who we are, and everything I've learned from painting the portraits is that everybody is so much, want to return to another one? Everybody is so much more than the simple version of something so simple as the skin color, or so simple as a group identity, right? So I like this one here with the woman. I like to talk about this one too, which is skewed. So you see it's small, right? And you can definitely see the distortion in it, right? And you can't help but see that. And then go close to it. A skewed view rendered squarely by closer proximity is the title of this piece. And I felt like it was what we think, what we do to older people, right? What we do to older people is we have this skewed view of age, right? And when you get closer to any older person, it's rendered squarely by closer proximity. I mean, being with an older person, and even myself as I'm approaching age, you can think of it as a person approaching age, you know, the skewed view rendered squarely, or even meeting an older person. You see that as soon as you open yourself up to that person, you can be transformed by that engagement. And I feel like a lot of times older people are not seen. They're like distorted because we're putting older people into these this sort of skewed view, right? Especially culturally in our country. And I think that we've never sort of experienced that more than we have in the last year, you know, with COVID. So that piece, so the Optical Illusion show didn't only talk about the politics of the political hot buttons like race, which wasn't even fully formed as it is now. This was 2017 when I was painting these paintings. I mean, the fire's only been more lit since I was working on this piece. It was also about sort of even aging, or like the white guy gets in there, right? Because all of us feel in some way, whenever we're sort of limited to this smaller perspective, that we are like the singular part of ourselves, or maybe even in the word of the college language, intersectionality. Even if it's intersectionality, even if I say I'm like this, and this, 3 or 4 things, I'm still limiting who I am or who you are as a human being. You know, and I'm like, so the theme of this show, and the reason why I found it like even putting people, so you want to try another one, Chuck? Anybody want to point at one you want me to talk about from them? Yeah. The top right one, let's see. Yeah, so this one I did. I think this is one's kind of hopeful one, right? Do you laugh? Because I feel like she wrote, she's got the tape in her hand, and she puts this "too shall pass," and you have this black dark mass passing through, right? And I don't know, like I leave it to you to see that, like which way that narrative affects you, like. And I think at different stages inside of this painting, at different points that you could come to this painting at different points and see that you're in the mass or that the mass is passing, right? That the dark weight is passing. But I felt like it was a really good painting to pair with the Illusion show, because it's about knowing that even all of these concerns, even all these ways we identify ourselves, and all the groups that we identify with, and all the groups that we think we don't identify with, even that whole thing in the grand scheme of things will pass, right? And there's some sort of, to me, there's some sort of hope in that. But I really love the fact that she has the tape in her hand. I mean, she was the one that put the message up. And the name of this painting is called Remembrance of the Future, right? What? Oh yeah, that's an optical, that's trompe-l'oeil, right? I painted the tape. It's not tape. You knew that, right? Everybody knew that, yeah. They knew that, Chuck. Yeah, it's good. We have a sophisticated audience here, Chuck. So I guess I want to talk about the guy in the middle. So this painting is called The Distortion of Force Used by Some Who Proclaim Faith in the One Who Said, the meek shall inherit the earth. Is that right, Chuck? And this is the Ames room. You guys know that room? You know that all those figures, that guy is the same on all three of those. That's the same. People know that optical illusion? Yeah, but you can't help but see him bigger, can you? I love this painting because this really demonstrates this trick that happens to us. And my thought was if we could see that, and you're still interested, it keeps happening, right? Everybody sees it. Nobody's seen them all the same size yet, are you? Anybody getting it? To not do it with your head? Because that's actually a bunch of systems that are happening in your head where when one system can actually override the other system for the information that you understand to go over top of the visuals that you're having, right? And that's an interesting dynamic that could be happening inside your mind right now. You know, you could be actually experiencing the difference between what you really see. Oh, geez, it's so interesting. I shouldn't even talk about it because I don't know enough about it because I'm still learning the grasses. Fair enough? But I am on the right track is what I'm saying. I know I'm on the right track. So I did that painting after Charlottesville, right? That was when that one came in, you know, because we have these guys like in the United States of America stand on the streets with guns. I thought you only saw that in third world countries. I mean, I really did. I mean, and hearing some of the things that those guys were saying, I just never imagined in these 21st century that we would be there as a country. It was just kind of shocking. I don't care which way of this political spectrum you fall on. That had to be painful. It has to be painful in some core of your humanity, to me, it strikes me. So anyway, so here I like this one too, Chuck, the us and them. This one's pretty good, right? Pretty wavy kind of thing happening with that optical illusion. And what they really are just squares. And by what I put on the edge of that, do you guys still getting the warp happening? Us and them warping the peripheral, right? That dichotomy of us and them is warping our perspective on everything. It's kind of the text, the thought that I put on top of it. But I put like things in the corners, and you guys can kind of see them, right? Stop, welcome, U.S., dollars. Who knows what keeps people from wanting people to be here? I don't know. So it's like, that optical illusion. Let's see which one else, Chuck. The guy, Robert. So this one is an impossible home for invisible dreams. And I don't know if you can, what? Perhaps. Oh, that's right. I'm supposed to say perhaps, because Chuck didn't want the title to be hopeless. Perhaps an impossible home for invisible dreams. And if you look up at the house that's on his forehead, is it flipping back and forth for you yet, where it's one part is coming forward, one part's coming back? If it isn't, is it, yep, 5 minutes, 10 minutes? Okay. All right, want to keep going to another one? So this one, vaulting the disproportionate illusion of a transparent wall. Do you remember that? So those two brown things look like they're different sizes, but they're both the same size. Maybe it's hard to read in this lighting. They're all the same size, but that's just a trick that's happening in your mind. And let's do, this is not a nude. Okay, you ready for this one? This is pretty political, isn't it? Title, Fake Nudes, How to Trump the Media, right? Was how I titled that painting. I thought it was really funny at the time that when I was painting this painting, that we have on the computer, we have Facebook blocking off the breasts and parts of women's bodies, but it was okay to actually put in all kinds of politically distorted information to actually ruin democracy, right? And I'm like, well, you know, Facebook could find a better thing to, what do you call it, edit or curate. Maybe we would be better off curating sort of some of the things that we say, not just things that we look at. So this is not a nude, which goes back to, what's his face, who Chuck, the painter, French painter. The pipe, this is not a pipe. You know who I'm talking about? Yeah, so I was playing off of that idea. So anyway, I think we only have like a few minutes left. Do you want to talk about anything else, Chuck? I gotta find a closing now, right? So we were talking about the universe. We're gonna get back to that. What? Oh, so this is the other part that's showing over at the Kristen Peterson, and this is sort of a series that I started. The first one is The Boy in the Middle. I did that in 1989. He was a 9-year-old boy I met on the streets in Chicago, and this was a crumbling mural that I put him in front of a young black boy being pulled by his mother or grandmother down the street, right? And I thought it was very interesting to contrast the two people. But I was a young painter then. You can kind of see that I hadn't really didn't know how to paint as well as I know now. I mean, I'd only been painting for like 2 or 3 years at the time that I painted that painting. But then the next one is, this is called the Incognito Series. And I was like, so this model, do I want to go with that? I'm trying to figure out which way to end. I'm trying to figure out which direction I'm going to end on here. So this model came in, and I was going to paint her in this like really saintly pose for another series that I was working on. And I had met her in a drawing class, and she's far away in the drawing class, but when she comes and poses for me, she takes off her shirt, and she has a tattoo on her arm that says, "Anger is my friend." And all of a sudden, I realized that she may not be the most perfect model for a supplicant pose, asking the universe to come embed its wisdom inside of her, totally nude, right? So I said, well, Jennifer, why don't you go home and let me think about another way to use you for a painting? And I got this idea that night, and the next day she came in. And I really liked the idea that she's trying to fit in to a three-dimensional being trying to fit into a two-dimensional world, which is another way we see ourselves, like identity. That is a perfect picture to me of what identity is. A label I put on myself or a label I put on another person is just a two-dimensional thing, or not even two-dimensional, it's almost one-dimensional thing, that we are this full-rounded being trying to fit into this two-dimensional world. So the Incognito Series really kind of pairs well. But I'll just tell you a quick thing. So Jennifer, I left her when she's posing for me. I said, Jennifer, everybody in this painting, they're all holding tools, right? All these characters are holding tools. And I said, Jennifer, what is your tool, right? And I asked her that on the first day of the painting. She went home, and day 2 she didn't bring an answer. And usually you try to get a model invested in a painting, but I don't force them into be invested in a painting, right? And I wanted her to kind of care about what the painting was about. And that question was kind of a lead to see if what she would bring to it. She didn't come back day 2, and I didn't ask her. Day 3, nothing. Day 4, she said, you know, Rose, you asked me what my tool was, all right? And I think my tool is a question. And I got shivers. I'm like, I think that's the perfect tool to be in question, right? And so in her hand, you really can't tell what the tool is. I left it like you don't know. I left it in a nuance. But if you see the hand that's holding the rag, it is like the cloth. It's a cloth totally embroidered with question marks, right? And so she's holding this cloth with the question marks. But I left it so you wouldn't know what her tool was. Yeah, go ahead, 5 minutes. And so this series is about people. Are you putting yourself into a historical perspective? Are you stepping out? Are you embracing it? Or which way do you see it? So it's really about the person in the painting trying to, and this guy's holding a lantern, right? And he's like, I leave it to my model to tell me how they feel about what I show them the painting that I'm putting them in. I leave it to them to sort of tell me how they feel about their role in it, you know? And I'm going to leave it to the viewers to decide what it is. And this one is called Haunted by What Neither Is. That's from a E.E. Cummings poem that I really love. But I can't really say it. I can try. Haunted by what neither is. The echo of a dream, or the flowering of a dream echoing, I think. Anybody know that poem? It's a great poem. Sorry, I can't go into it. So you know that I started the Faces of Iowa State at the State Fair, and this is a picture of me working on the paintings and learning. So you seeing people, right? And starting with the messy chaos and trying to find them inside of it, and both of us finding our way inside the conversation that we will have. You guys know Grace, right? And so I guess I hope it's okay that I took a risk to do the Illusion show and moved away from just when I painted Faces of Iowa State and when I paint Portrait of Maquoketa, I feel like my job as a painter in that regard is to sort of step back and allow the person that I'm painting to begin to emerge more than me. That would be what I would hope for, right? That's kind of the idea, that they would sort of emerge more, and that like this process of talking while we paint is like one of the ways I think that we discover each other. And taking the time to actually do that. Go ahead, Chuck, start to move. To start to move that, you start to see that that this like whatever way we see ourselves, right? Well, how do I want to say it? We put ourselves in groups. We put ourselves with identity. We limit other people's by that identity. In a way, we use this thing that we call identity to fragment ourselves, right? To divide ourselves. And it strikes me that what I've learned most from every person that I've ever painted is that if I sit back and I receive them, right? Like in the illusions, if I see that I am tricked by the illusion, at the same time, like the fact that the optical illusion is so lighthearted is really interesting to me. That you experience that trick without anything costing you anything, right? If we could learn to see other people, the thing that I think they are, that I put in front of them before I meet them, or the thing I think I am, that I put in front of them before they meet me. If we could sort of pull back a little bit and sit somewhat quietly, I think that we would see that that space, that we can forgive them for putting me in that box and my putting them in the box, right? That if we could just sort of allow that to happen, I guess I feel that it would be another way, and maybe it's the way that I'm hoping, right, if I can sort of bring an intellectual commentary to it that I'm trying to do in my paintings. And maybe it's a way that I can actually be like some of the people that I've met here at Iowa State. It's like a way that I can actually help contribute to us as a species. And I really do mean like e pluribus unum, all right? And if we, any way that we can begin to allow the identities, the way we see each other, to be put in an unknown, like the grasses, like I just don't know them, but I see them, right? I see them, and just start from there, right? Everything about what we bring. I don't know, I guess we talked yesterday with Derek, and now this will be my final thought. Derek and I were posing, and I don't know if I can tell this story because I think it's his story, so I'm not going to say it. But we had this moment where he shared something with me, and it struck me as, when he described that moment, it struck me as the one thing in my 55 years on the planet that I believe is a truth, is that we're here as these embodied universes to witness and experience the entire universe's desire to be seen. And when he told me that story, I told him that I felt like he had been a perfect witness. And it was a story he said when he was 4 years old. I said, you were a perfect witness for what it is to be here and what I think is needed. And I guess if we could somehow keep finding that, looking for those opportunities to be here for each other, that maybe we could find a way to heal some of the divisiveness that we're experiencing. So anyway, that's it. Masked. All right.
Thank you, Rose. Okay. So good job, Rose. Awesome job, as always. We do have time for questions from you all. I'm going to be the mic holder, and I will have you guys raise your hand if you have a question for Rose, and then I will, say it over the mic so everyone can hear it. So yeah, if we have any questions, go ahead.
If you've had enough, you can leave too. Oh,
yes, you can leave. If you need to leave, you may leave.
I'm green now.
Okay.
Yes, go ahead.
In the Optical Illusion, your subjects, they're real people?
Almost all of them are real people.
I didn't know.
Almost all of them are real people. There's one person Chuck showed you. Can you go to the illusion thing, Chuck, real quick? There's one person that I painted from a drawing from the 1920s. That's the only person that's not a real person in the project. This guy here. He was a real person because the guy that drew him was a real person too. But I took this drawing that was in a book that I love, just a book of this guy's drawings, but I changed the character. You probably wouldn't know this guy from that drawing except for the gesture of the head and the arc of it. But I totally made up all of that color and all of that stuff. But everybody else is a real person. 2 or 3 of them are not from my photographs, but from a friend of mine's photographs. And almost all of the smaller paintings that when you see the person's, like the full body or their hands and stuff, all those people sat for me, all right? And like the big head, like this guy posed for me. His name is Jordan. In Arizona, he posed for me. This is called Spirals Diminished by Spiraling Selves, right? This guy had a really interesting story, and this optical illusion fits perfectly with his story. So he's a pretty interesting guy. But that optical illusion looks like spirals, but it's not. Those are just circles, but the fact that it's white on one side and dark on the other makes you think it's spiraling in and outward. And you see how he just did that right? If I could do that at myself, in front of my most upset moments, right? Like if there could be that space between, that's what I'm looking for. Like that's what I felt like was the redeeming idea that I was trying to get to for the Optical Illusion show. Like that we can see that we're tricked in our eyes. Why can't we understand where we're tricked in our brains? Because really what the trick that's happening in the eyes in an optical illusion is really a trick that's happening in your brain. Ultimately, that's what it's like. Your brain is putting one piece of information up against the information that you're seeing and giving you an illusion. So So go ahead. Does anybody else have a question?
I'd like to have either Ed or Mary tell how it was to be in front of Rose and to experience the intensity of her gaze. Mary or Ed?
Pressure's on Ed. Pressure's on Mary. Ed can do it. Mary's gonna let you. Ed, you don't have to say anything. Don't, but if you want to, it's okay. I know you're a shy guy, Ed.
Yeah, thank you. Well, I wasn't shy during the 7-hour experience. I really felt it was real. And how often do you have a really real experience like that?
What's interesting about painting somebody rather than photographing a person is that what we do is we do it over time, right? And in that time that you and I spent together, there were places where we met each other. That's what I like to call that, where we, together something. And there's times when we're both ourselves, right? Like the person that goes to the grocery store. And I think because painting happens over time, and we have that engagement over a period of time, those moments are continuously, they're allowed to happen in that. And I just really feel like time is the thing that's needed. Also attention. Right, one of the things that I really learned is, I was on a panel once, and somebody asked me, the group was all asked, everybody on the panel was asked, what would you want to tell somebody in the future? Like 100 years now, if they opened up a time bottle, or 50 years from now, what would you want them to know? And I said something that, this was in 2004 or 5, before social media. And I said, and I didn't know social media was on the horizon. I'm way behind. I still don't have a smartphone, so everybody does. I said, you are your attention, right? And now we see that what's going on, that social media, like what we have seen is where you put your attention now is how you feel. And we now know that your attention is actually what all of Facebook, Google, all those guys are fighting for, right? The way we're being manipulated to stay on those services. I think they're fabulous services. My mom's never been so happy to connect with people, especially during COVID. And we know that there's insanely great things about the communication. In fact, the line that I used with the Illusion show, and I didn't frame that today. It was hard because we had all the other work to frame around. But in the Illusion show, when I presented on the wall, the thing that I learned is that we are evolutionarily, we have biological pressures to other people, to put people in the category of other. Like they have people who study empathy, and they see that empathy is only really, the individual person is only really possible to actually extend empathy to about 150 people, right? 150 people. And yet at this time that we're living in, we have a communication device. We have a visual communication device. So not only do we see people, hear people, right? We can look at people, for 7 billion people almost now. And we have the ability to only empathize with 150 people. So we are being challenged, like no time in human history, to have something that's needed. I think the thing that human beings build together, this is one of the things I learned when I was painting the Illusion show, the reason why we survived as a species is because of empathy. Our ability to be engaged with another person, the ability to feel with another person, is the reason why we've been able to actually make the things that have created the progressive world that we live in, the world we live in. So when we are asked to have empathy for 7 billion people, and we're only evolutionarily, biologically now able to do 150 people, this transition that we're in the middle of is messy. And it's going to be messy. Like every time we see the pendulum swing, like in the perceptions of identity, every time a group is like, this is my group, blah, 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 othering, the whole othering thing. Every time it's like the fervent, the reason why it's so passionate is because we're the species, we're trying to learn to broaden empathy. right? So we're going to swing one way in the pendulum. Everything's going to seem too far, too much struggle, too much divisiveness, too much of all the things that we don't yet understand, because evolution is about failing and failing and failing until you get it, right? Until the next thing emerges. And I think that's what we, if we could look at it more from a larger, longer perspective, we would see that this is what evolving to have empathy of 7 billion people looks like. You see that? Never have we been so challenged to embrace so many different people. See that? I mean, this is the struggle that we're in front of. And of course, then we have to feed them. We have to clothe them. Now we know that they're not clothed. Now we know they're not fed. And this causes suffering. We understand there's so much suffering, more suffering than we've ever met before. Right? They say that we are more attuned with the way we are at this point in our evolutionary biology we can have more empathy for one child in a well that's fallen in a well than 5,000 kids starving in Africa. It's like we just can't get there yet. And I think that this is what so it's like yesterday, those 2 young people, right, posing for me. I'm sitting there and I'm like, trying not to okay boomer them, right? And try not to over potentialize them. Like, you are like, but I'm like, when we're having this moment, we were having this exchange yesterday, I was like, and they're like, we're navigating this stuff and they're giving me some like amazing feedback. And I'm like, the things that you guys are talking about, like the things that we're looking at, this is, I think, the tools that you guys are going to need. And at 55 years old, I'm not going to be the person. When you're 55, you guys are being in front of this stuff. We're leaving you kind of a messy planet, right? And I'm like, my job right now is to actually give you hope and to build your confidence in it and to believe that the tools that we're talking about are the ones that are going to, I feel like they're, when I'm meeting them, I feel like they're discovering the tools that they're going to need. And one of them is their attention and an understanding about what their attention is. But anyway, so sorry, I'm going on. You guys want to go? I mean, I can keep going forever, right? Because...
Would you still like to hear from me?
I'd love to hear you. Yeah.
I'm the kind of person that really does not like to be in front of the camera. I don't like pictures of myself ever. So I was anxious about what this was going to be like. So when we began, it was a kind of a head experience for me. Oh, she's putting yellow over there, and she's doing that. And at some point in the middle, I felt like it stopped being a painting, and it started to be me up there. I felt seen, as you said, and that was magic. I was no longer anxious about, was my picture going to look pretty or okay? It just was me, and it was okay. It was an okay me. And that, I don't know how else to describe how that felt.
Mary, there'll never be another one of you. You are it. This is it, right? And if I can, so that's when I painted portrait of Maquoketa, that is what I learned, that we all ache to be seen. Yeah. And it's like back to the idea of this witnessing, like this universe witnessing itself, right? So if the least I can do is let you feel seen in a day, then one thing I've done is actually one of the most things I can possibly do as a human being. Do you know what I mean? I mean, it feels like that feeling, I'm so touched that you felt seen. But on the other side of it, when it's happening for you, it's happening for me too.
Yep.
And I just
felt like we both knew it had happened.
We both felt it.
Yep.
It's like an exchange. And I find this idea that when you saw that emerge on the canvas through my eyes, right? And it's like the only way, in a way, this is why this identity thing is so tricky, right? One of the ways we can see ourselves is through another person. But what we really need is that other person to be just kind of a open vessel in a way, a person that just receives me as I am, right? And I am okay as I am, as I am. But all the things that you thought you wanted to be were all the things that we put on ourselves and we put on other people too. So like this ache to be seen and this, the idea that you, like on your deathbed, okay, every face that you see will be of another person. Like my life is the life of seeing Chuck, but Chuck's life is the life of looking at me. Fair enough? That idea puts me on my knees. Like it just represents to me so much about what we are for each other, okay? Just like right there, because I can never see my own face. I can see my face in a reflection in a mirror, but we know it's backwards and it's distorted and smaller, right? I can never see me, but I can see Chuck, and I can see you. And it's like, to me, it's like a gift we have. So when you go to the grocery store, okay, and we've learned this with COVID, right? The value of the people at the grocery store. It's insane to me. That like finally, COVID taught us that this thing, that these people that are serving us, checking on our stuff, now we see how vital they are, right? So, I mean, before I was even doing this, and ever since Portrait of Maquoketa, not always, but most of the time, I try when I'm at that checkout to see that person, right? It's like the least I can do. The toll worker, when he's handing me my money, can I see him, right? It's not that I'm going to do it all the time, and it's not that not all the time that I'm out of my own way to see that person, but I feel like there's all these places where we could interject this thing that you felt with me, we could give it to another person. It's like it's all over the place, and maybe the suffering of the world would be softened. Because I really think that this idea of dignity, this idea of what's my contribution, this idea of who am I, this idea of being seen is so fundamental to the human experience, so core to what we're here for, you know?
It was an experience to experience art as transformative.
Exactly. Exactly. Yeah, beautiful. Thank you, Mary.
Okay, I don't know if there are any last questions, we could maybe do one more, but otherwise I think, thank you all for coming, and it's been really great having everyone here in person and having you, of course, Rose and Chuck, so yeah.
All right, thank you guys. Thank you.